Value in Schools podcast with me, Liz Wortham, where we talk about all things sustainability. And today I'm delighted to be joined by James Browning, Chief Operating Officer at Lift Schools, to delve into the world of artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, and how it's impacting on schools. And I think we'll be touching on both practical aspects, such as how staff in schools can make positive use of AI tools, as well as some of the more philosophical questions, like what does it now mean to be human? James, you're someone with a tech background, and I know that AI is something you're really interested in and have been very involved with. So tell me, what's exciting you about the impact of AI, and what, if anything, is worrying you?
Well, first of all, Liz, thank you for having me on. It's great to be here. And what a great first question to have. I think the context to my answer to this is that my career prior to joining the trust space directly was that I had 15 years providing EdTech, being part of a provider to EdTech to schools. And throughout that 15 years, I yearned for this, if you like, kind of golden mantra of having positive impacts on education. And, you know, to a certain extent, we had successes in those 15 years. But to come to your point about what really excites me about AI is it feels like genuinely now, for the first time, we have a technology that can make a difference. And I would describe the difference that it has on those previous technologies that I'd worked with, if you like, in my previous career, is that it has an ability to impact more of the cognitive work we do, both for our staff, but also to an extent our pupils as well, as we'll know get into. So it's beyond the clerical. We've had systems for some time that support, if you like, back office and the way in which we work. And yes, AI has a part to play with those, but also when we think about the work that we do cognitively, supporting, really leveraging workload reduction, supporting high quality thinking, although I would really emphasize that bit about supporting, allowing us to generate more foresight, spot patterns, think about testing scenarios. And I think in the long term, although most of my points I just made would apply to staff, also, I do believe that it will help to genuinely personalize learning as well. So that really, really does excite me.
So, yeah, do you see it as, say, perhaps one of the particular benefits for education is that helping staff, helping workflows, work reduction, making education a better place to be?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. And we'll no doubt come on and talk about the way in which we're applying that as a strategy in Lift Schools. But just to give you kind of a sprinkling of that, one of the two of the really key guiding principles of that strategy are, first of all, around workload. And it's not just workloads for workload's sake. It's about being very conscious of two of the big challenges we have, like many trusts and schools across the sector, are around use of time and indeed how that links into our management of our talent. Or in other words, how we see workload, kind of calling a drain upon people and allowing them to be as effective as they can be. And then also the impact that has on ability to retain people and develop people. So if we can use AI to support us with those two things, and ultimately it's about driving up job satisfaction, driving up impact. It's not just doing it for the sake of it. It's giving people more fulfillment and more impact. Then I think that's really key. But then specifically to the education impact as well. And this is a more contentious area, but I still would, be keen to make the point. I think it also does have the potential to personalize learning, as I mentioned, and that is an enhancement as well as a workload reducer. It can help to enhance. The only thing I'd say about that is that we as an organization and me individually feel really passionate that is a supporting role. It's not a replacing the teacher piece. And that is something that's been really key for us as part of our strategy, is to get that message out there and continuously say it. Because AI does bring about a fear of replacement and marginalization. And that, for us is absolutely not the case.
Absolutely, yeah. So are there things that you're worried about in terms of AI, or is it more you see other people having worries?
Well, I definitely have my fair share of worries. I think about I like to think of myself as kind of in the middle of the conversation and the debate, if you like. I'm definitely not, even though I'm a technologist by background, I'm not what you might call a techno-futurist, where I just run to the tech. If I were to be pushed, I would probably be one of those early adopters, but I'm not the kind of person that always just sees the positive. But I'm also definitely not a kind of ultra concerned, what I might call a lock it and block it kind of type of person. So, but I do have my fair share of worries. I think my worries, first and foremost, play to that point around making sure that we're using it in the right way. Because if we were using it in the wrong way, I think that it does risk marginalizing roles where it could devalue the experience. And I think one of the key points there is making sure we're clear that human connection is protected. And that is a really key part of teaching, is a key part of other jobs in society as well. But human connection is so, so important to the teaching and learning process. And that underpinning that is the ability to have empathy, to be really creative in our connections. So that is a worry, is making sure we safeguard and protect that. And there are bits in the teaching and learning process like writing and reading and really understanding the information that I think is really core to that human connection. And there are bits in our curriculum which I think we should safeguard as well, like physical education, the creative arts, etc., and making sure we're really key there. More widely than that, I think other worries I have are, if done wrong, then we could create more inequality. And that's particularly relevant to us, where our trust is a national trust, which has schools right across the country in different communities. And I think there is a risk that if we get it wrong, we could create a bigger divide and a bigger disadvantage gap. If done right, it could do the opposite. I worry about kind of shallow adoption, if you like. I think that particularly at this stage of AI, there's a chance that we could kind of run in and the hype curve, as sometimes it's called, could kind of take us over a little bit. I worry about data governance, and that's a key part of our strategy, is making sure that we are really, really protective of people's personal data. So that's just a few of the worries. And I think by naming them, hopefully you get a sense that that's not a reason not to embrace it, but it is really important to find your kind of middle point on that spectrum of techno-futurism and lock it and block it, as I refer to it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, like you, I'm that mixture. I'm curious, have the things I'm cautious about or worried about. But yeah, I'm also using AI tools in my work. I noticed that, say, the DFE, I think, recently announced they're investing money in AI tutoring, and see this as a way of addressing disadvantage. And yeah, I wasn't quite sure what I felt about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That's a really good example where it really it kind of flirts with what you might consider to be the line, doesn't it? Because I think you think about AI tutoring as a concept, and you are, just by the nature of the word tutoring, you're drawn to an understandable conclusion that it is in some way taking the role of a teacher. But I think there's a very thin line between the concept of a tutor and actually just a really powerful platform that can support children, pupils, to do their own independent learning, because that's what it is really. It's not being tutored. It's about having a platform that supports you on a learning pathway. And actually that can be very supportive to the human role of a teacher. And there are platforms out there today that will take, a subject, take a particular area, and it will quickly help to identify where the child is at in terms of their knowledge and understanding, and then challenge them, feed them a bit of knowledge, and then challenge that, and then create a tailored pathway. And the brilliant thing, if done well, is that the teacher can then interact with that, see where an intervention would be useful. Of course, that can also be complementary to in and outside of classroom time. So I like to think, because I'm an optimist, that when we talk about AI tutoring, it's the right side of the line. I think if we go the other side and we see it start to attempt to be something that if you like, encroaches into that human connection piece, that's where I think it does cause the concern.
Interesting. And yes, and before we go on to hearing a bit more about what you're doing at Lift, just tell me a bit more about that worry around inequality and potentially AI creating more educational inequality. How would that play out in practice?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of levels to that. I think on a very basic level, there's the reality that in order to access AI, you need a technology provision which is consistent. And so there's an expectation that for any trust or local authority, responsible body to make the most of AI, you need a sufficient technology provision. And many trusts, ourselves included, invested heavily in technology during the pandemic. There's been a bit of a post-pandemic lull, kind of actually have we maintained things like one-to-one device policies? What is our ongoing refresh strategy? Are we making sure that there is always a device available? Because that's really the barrier, isn't it? On top of that, you need to make sure everybody has good connectivity. If there's an expectation that this involves home learning, do people have good connectivity at home? These are the kind of areas that can sometimes create that disparity, because in certain families, that access would be unquestionable. In other areas, it might be shared. It might not necessarily be there. So we need to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind in that basic provision. I think on top of that, there's a risk also that the appetite to kind of fully understand and embrace can also create a disparity. So we've seen a correlation between our higher performing schools and use of some of the platforms that are adopting AI, because they've got a better culture of homework. And so that allows them to make further gains on top of what was already arguably a gain in the first place by having that culture. So you can see how that could widen the gap. And so I think we need to work on both of those layers to make sure we don't create, further disparity.
Enjoying the podcast? Hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. It will help other educators discover us too. Now back to the show. So tell us, James, a bit more about the approach then you've been taking towards AI at Lift.
Sure. And I'll try not to take the whole rest of the podcast to do so. We are now officially 1 year into our AI strategy as defined, although in truth, we've been working on it for about 18 months or so, maybe a little longer actually. And in short, like many of our strategic initiatives, as we call them, our strategic change programs, we break the work down into 3 horizons. We call upon McKinsey's model of thinking, and I'll no doubt butcher McKinsey's model here, so apologies for anybody that listens to this that has any association with McKinsey. But in short, my version of it is that it's about thinking about any strategy through 3 horizons and doing that in parallel. It's not a waterfall model. It's about thinking about the first horizon. This is the stuff you do today that supports the today. The second horizon is the stuff you do today that supports the medium term. And predictably, the third horizon is the stuff you do today that supports the long term. And I do stress in each of those cases, it's about thinking about all 3 today. And in short, with our AI strategy, that is very meaningful, because this is a rapidly changing space. And it is about being conscious that those 3 horizons potentially have very, very different landscapes that we're dealing with. The first horizon for us has been about driving up awareness across our workforce and to an extent with our pupils as well. And we're a big organization, 4,500 staff, and we have actively chosen to really invest in every member of staff being exposed to just a really, really, if you like, kind of basic awareness of good use of AI. So some of the guiding principles that I've already touched upon being really enforced and reinforced, I should say, and really clear to people, getting out there with an initial tool set of things that can help with these domains of helping with your productivity or helping to impact teaching and learning. And getting that out there has been, for us, far more important than, for example, creating an AI policy. We've really rebutted against that and tried to get that awareness out. Horizon 2 is thinking about that in a slightly more sustainable way, because you can't just do that over and over forever. Horizon 2 is just being conscious of the fact that actually this is going to be a rapidly evolving world. How do we sustainably onboard new technologies, new tools? How do we think about changing and adapting our IT service model? So, for example, we have introduced a brand new role into our IT service, which we call the Technology Support Officer. And we have 20 of those TSOs, as we call them, across our 58 schools, just soon to be 59. And they have a permanent remit to support teachers and other members of staff in use of these technologies, because we recognize just doing a kind of one-off CPD is not going to have the impact. So that's Horizon 2, is about making a sustainable methodology that really does, kind of go into the future. And then finally, Horizon 3, which once again, I stress we are thinking about and doing work on today, is being conscious that if we're going to be really impactful with this, we need those tools we onboard. We need the systems that we work with today to really join up, because using the data that comes from those systems and creating a joined up, if you like, AI empowered ecosystem is going to be fundamental to the long term. It will be really contributing to our long-term vision we've created of what a school might look like. And so doing that's really important. We're also really, really keen to work with the sector. And so, well, part of the reason I love doing things like this is being able to share our vision of what it might look like, but then also work with others. Even though we're a big trust, the pupils that we serve only represent about 1% of all the children in the sector. So we're not going to have the impact we want if we just do it in isolation. So Horizon 3 is a bit more kind of bigger picture thinking in that set. And so one year in, we've kind of really got going with all three of those streams of work. We're actually just at the point of reflection on that at the moment. And we're reflecting on how we are having the impact we'd hoped in terms of really driving up awareness, which is great. We've just done a review and we're deciding that we're going to put more effort into really understanding not just kind of the AI stuff, but the stuff that sits below that, the day-to-day work, the processes that sit in some of our core, if you like, less snazzy systems, but do need to be AI empowered, like our finance systems, HR systems, MIS systems, and really getting deep. And sometimes it's not always about jumping to the AI. It's just about thinking about what are the processes, what are the things that our people are spending time doing, and how can we think about making those as efficient as possible? And then AI comes thereafter. So that's our kind of 1 year reflection.
Thank you, James. So could you tell us a bit, give us some examples of some of the ways in which staff are using AI tools and it is helping them save time or reduce workload?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll pick up on an example from a teacher, an example from a member of support staff, and then I'll pick up on an example from our central team. And they all kind of fit with those principles that I've touched upon already. So if I pick up on a teacher, really the focus area for us is around the periphery of the role so that we can enable the teacher to focus on the teaching and learning process. So in the first instance, we've looked at areas like lesson prep, marking, and really tried to make those as efficient as possible. And in the process, actually, hopefully make them more effective. So we're using a tool called Brisk. Many of our teachers are using that to help them in doing really, really effective prep for lessons. So the thought still has to go in from the teacher, but they're able to really efficiently create engaging lessons using their own content, but other content as well to bring that in, and allows them to bring in things like quizzes and formative assessment tools, etc., in a really effective way. And they can do that in minutes rather than hours. On the marking side, we're in the midst of a trial with a platform called No More Marking, where we're taking an approach to be powered by not just the AI, but the technology generally, to be more efficient in the way that we think about that follow-up from the teaching and learning process. So 2 examples there from the teaching sphere. If I think about the back office, our support staff for a second, it does play to where a lot of our members of staff in those spaces are spending their day-to-day in systems like our MIS. And so we're working with our MIS partner around areas such as report writing, and in some cases, taking that a step further and automating some tasks. So, for example, there's a bit of technology in our MIS which is allowing us to automatically capture voicemails on absence. And so previously, our attendance officers were spending quite a long time listening to voicemails, turning that into reports and that data going in. Well, the objective now is less about capturing that data and more about taking the action to support that, either return to school or understanding that. And that's so critical because, like much of the sector, attendance is massive for us, and really focusing on that. And then finally, an example from our central team. Well, probably worth giving an example from our people team, our HR team, where they're using AI really, really effectively to support the recruitment and, to a certain extent, the retention process. So things like drafting job packs, drafting interview questions, helping us to be really, really thoughtful. And that's not just about being efficient. It's also about actually challenging ourselves on what good questions look like. The key there is making sure that we own the input and the output. It's not just doing it what AI says, and really, really owning that. So that's a good example of many, many examples across our central team where we're encouraging people to use tools in their day-to-day work to hopefully be more effective, hopefully be more efficient, but also be more effective and impactful as an output.
And in terms of your pupils, so How are you using AI with them? What are you teaching them about? And is that something you see changing and shaping in the future?
Yes, yes, and yes. It's absolutely an evolving piece. This and this is definitely an area of our strategy, which, as part of that 1 year review I mentioned, we're taking a moment because quite a lot's happened in a year. Actually, we've had a curriculum review. The very landscape of AI is evolving. And I think there are a few different lenses to this. There's obviously making sure that we are teaching and preparing students for an awareness of AI in their education. I'll come back to it in just a second. There is making use of AI in the learning process. But there's also a reality, and this is part of our kind of long-term vision piece, is accepting with a fair degree of certainty now, I think it's fair to say, that the job landscape that our children are going to go into is going to be very, very different. And think about our year sevens and eights of today, they will be going into a landscape which it's highly likely that there will be a different view of what good jobs look like, if such a thing could be framed. And with that framing that I gave earlier, that there's a real value on human connection, on creativity, empathy, etc. Well, you think about the kind of roles that are likely to be prevalent. I mean, I'm definitely biased in saying this, but I think teaching is one of those. Care for other human beings, the arts, creative roles. Those are the roles that I think we should be preparing our young people for. So bringing that back to your question, because I appreciate I've skirted around it slightly. Right now, today, that is a balance of being really clear with children what AI is and what it's not, getting some of those basics right, how to use it as a learning partner, not as a shortcut. And much like the way in which we teach children to use calculators, you've got to understand the working and then you can use it as a tool. Really trying to safeguard some of the key things that we think are important to an education, critical thinking. I've talked about reading, writing, and some of the things that sit around that. Teaching about ethics and digital literacy as well. But I do think that there will be more to come in this space. And I think that we need to be considerate to enriching our offer to help children prepare for what will be lifelong learning. I know that is a term that's been used, in recent years, but I think this coming wave of AI, more than anything else in society, is going to enforce a likely reality that when children leave education, they will just carry on learning. And certain research suggests that they will likely have 4, 5, maybe even 6 distinct career changes because of the way in which AI is evolving. I think about my dad. He had one career to a large extent. He kind of had one job. I maybe sit in the middle. I've had a couple. I think the next generations will likely have much more of an ongoing learning process. And we need to prepare them for that on top of actually teaching them content and knowledge.
Interesting, isn't it? It makes me think already, because you talked about how you've now got more tech support officers in your school, and that's a role that you've prioritized, isn't it? I know, there are fears around some jobs might not be there so much because of AI, but then other things are going to come in instead, aren't they? I think, like with any technology, things get shaken up. And yeah, I think it's really true, isn't it? People are living longer, we're working for longer. So yeah, our young people need to be prepared for that flexible, changing world. And
Yeah.
I guess one of the big worries I have around AI is around the environmental piece and impact on energy, usage of water, things like that. How do you feel about that? Is that something you're concerned about?
It's a really good question. I am concerned about it, but it's not something that is currently holding us back in moving forward with the strategy. I should qualify that because it risks sounding quite flippant. But I think that it is something that is a system level challenge, something that is kind of beyond our sector and not something that we alone can solve. I think that ultimately there's no doubt about it. Data centers use energy, they impact the environment. And to get through that challenge, we need better infrastructure, greener compute. We need transparency on that. And that is something we would always look for. But actually, I think that needs to be looked at in a kind of total cost sense. So sometimes AI can also help to reduce the need for travel. It can reduce the need for printing. It can help to streamline inefficient processes and duplicated effort, which can have a knock-on environmental impact. So there is always two sides. I think the best we can do at the moment, our impact on this, I suppose, is pushing for responsible use, creating a relationship between this and our wider sustainability work. So having a consideration for it in our sustainability strategy and our net zero program. But I wouldn't want it to go quite as far as us stopping the embracement of this potential for AI. And my hope is, and it is a hope if I'm really honest with you, Liz, is that in time, smarter systems, lower and more efficient compute will mean greener compute, and the two will come together. I just hope I'm not too much of an optimist in that regard.
And I feel like too, it's not entirely clear as yet, isn't it, what the impact is? Like I've been looking at, say, how much water does it take every time you make a chat GPT query? And I've seen quite different responses to that. So I suspect that there's still some unpicking to do as the realities of the impact. And yes, it's true. I mean, like responsible use, how many videos do we need to create? Yeah. Okay. And so from your journey so far, what advice could you give to other trusts who are also trying to go down the road and explore further? Any lessons learned, pitfalls to avoid, things you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, certainly plenty of lessons learned. Absolutely. I think I've touched upon some of these, but I think it's really important to invest in staff confidence early. I think I've talked about our AI awareness program, and anybody that asks me about our AI policy, I would always try and steer the conversation, well, focus on awareness and confidence over policy, because policy will get out of date really quickly, and policy can, sometimes get in the way and not actually benefit you in a way that you might hope. Policy might follow, just to be really clear. I'm not anti-policy, but more investing in awareness and confidence is important. I think you can support that by establishing some really clear organizational guardrails. So I've touched upon most of ours already. Being clear as an organization that we see as a supporting role, not something that replaces teachers. Focusing on how it can personalize learning, how it can reduce workload, safeguarding the things you really don't want AI to touch. The only one I've not really touched upon is just being open actually to what we might refer to as a growth mindset. So you might change some of the things you do more radically as a result of AI. And I think we should be open to that. So by supporting those awareness sessions with those guiding principles, you can make sure there's a consistency across the organization, no matter how big you are. One bit of advice that I haven't touched upon, which I would really recommend, is in your strategy, trying to associate the work you're doing with real problems and challenges, not just kind of tools and fancy tech. So part of our Horizon 1 work, actually, which I've not touched upon, is really identifying areas of our current strategy which could do with a boost. So we have a very ambitious strategy across our attainment metrics, across all areas of our strategy, to be honest. But one area which we're finding particularly challenging is on key stage 4. So we focus real effort in investing in technology that support that particular part of our strategy. Similarly, workload, which we've touched upon a number of times, well, that's the thing that jumps out in our annual staff survey every year. So let's really focus on supporting people with that. So that can really help get the strategy off the ground. And I think we've learned that's really important. I think that the other thing we've learned is I'm a big advocate of pilots and trying stuff, but really challenge yourself on those pilots to make sure that they scale up. So the design of the pilot, if you're piloting a type certain tech with a certain problem statement, really challenge yourself on, is this going to scale well? Or actually, have we over-resourced the support that's set around that? Have we made it a bit artificial as a trial? It's one of the things that's always fascinated me about EdTech is that it's not really regulated. People can market EdTech tools kind of in any way they want. And if you compare that to areas like medical technology, where you can't say a single thing without a clinical trial, I think it's really important that us as responsible bodies take a role in making sure that when we pilot stuff, it is kind of as much as possible a simulation. It's really difficult because a child only gets one chance and you want it to be as impactful as you possibly can. You want it to be a success. But if you're going to scale something, you've really got to try it. So I'd really recommend thinking about that. And then the final thing, which we haven't cracked, and I'm always really keen to be clear that we're far from having all the answers here, is really trying to measure impact. And this has been a theme right through my career, to be honest with you, Liz, is the ultimate mantra for EdTech is being really clear on the measure of impact. And at the moment, we see good usage of platforms. We see good evidence of kind of time being saved, but it's largely anecdotal. We have done some studies. We did a really fascinating study called AI Works with Google, where we showed that teachers saved over 100 hours across a year. But actually, what we'd love to have is some real measures of efficacy across the things we're doing, the systems we're using, the process we've improved. And that's something we're still working on. If you can get to measures of impact, whether that be time saved or ultimate impact, rather than the kind of novelty of, this tool's lovely, then that I think is a real mantra. So yeah, I hope some of those are useful.
Definitely. And I think the policy is a really interesting one too, isn't it? Because I feel like I'm seeing quite a lot of people saying, oh, yes, we must have an AI policy. But I think you're right, isn't it? You'd be changing it all the time, wouldn't you? And also, you probably have an acceptable use policy anyway. Oh, wow. Thank you, James. And yeah, just to finish, tell us about, because we love learning about new things. So is there anything that you've been reading or listening to recently that's inspired you, maybe in the area of AI or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things actually that a little bit links to our experience and what made a difference is I had the honor of kind of doing a bit of a hostile takeover of our executive team reading list for a little while. So when we released the AI strategy, there's a bunch of books I could recommend, and one that it's 12 months now since I read it, but it's stuck with me to this day that I cannot recommend highly enough, is a book called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And Ethan actually has a brilliant Substack. He's a US professor, so he's an educator by trade. So he has a brilliant blog which really complements his book. And the thing that stood out to me about that book over other AI-oriented books and texts that I've read is that it really focuses on this. I mean, it's the clues in the title, co-intelligence. It's using AI as a kind of collaboration rather than just as a tool. I myself am guilty. I overuse this word tool, but actually the concept that it explores, which gets as close to the line as I'd like to be in terms of the role of AI, is seeing it as something that works alongside you. And actually, he talks about this kind of concept of being a cyborg, which it sounds quite scary to say out loud, but it's really thought-provoking in terms of where AI can be most impactful is if you're kind of working with it in harmony. Treat it as a bit like an intern for you. How can it work with you and learn from you? It really is close to the line. And I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with every bit of the book, but as something that challenges me on where we should find the line on that strategy, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much, James. And yeah, thank you for all the thought you've provoked. I feel like probably this has raised further questions. And yeah, it'd be lovely to catch up again and delve into some of these areas some more.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Liz. We enjoyed it.